reporting on an update on the ASR trial, the first one that's occurring in the nation in Los Angeles. It's the Kransky case. And we've listened to some testimony over the last couple of days that has been very, very interesting, most of it having to do with liability. The first witness to testify a couple days ago is an individual named Chris Hunt. Mr. Hunt was actually a very young engineer, a bioengineer who went to work for DePuy when he was 23 years old. And one of the first things that he did when he got there was work on the ASR project. Mr. Hunt testified about a couple of very interesting things. The first thing was he was asked questions about a memo that he prepared that had minutes of a meeting that he attended where the ASR design was discussed, and this was back in 2005. And according to these minutes, DePuy had actually considered and talked about performing studies to determine whether high cobalt and chromium levels could increase the risk of cancer. But according to the minutes that Mr. Hunt prepared, the decision was made not to do such studies because of concerns that the studies might have a negative result. And the testimony on that issue was very powerful. The second thing that Mr. Hunt talked about was how back in 2007, 2008, he had, in essence, figured out what was wrong with the design of the ASR. And it had to do with the geometry of the cup. And there was a lot of testimony about the geometry and what he had discovered. And the way it turned out was he had learned that the angle of the cup, at least the angle that the surgeons were seeing when they were installing the cup, was different than what the actual effective angle of the cup was. And he gave some very good testimony to explain how that could lead to what's called edge loading. And edge loading is where the part of the ball that touches the cup and the prosthetic hip sort of rides on the edge of the cup. And when that happens, according to Mr. Hunt in his PowerPoints and these documents that he prepared, that leads to massively increased wear. I think that was the language he used. So Mr. Hunt testified. So Mr. Hunt testified also about how after he discovered these problems, he and another group of engineers were actually appointed to figure out how to redesign the hip. And for some reason, the redesigning of the ASR at DePuy, they wanted to keep it secret. They didn't want anyone to know about it, even people within the company. So they termed the whole project Project Alpha. And Mr. Hunt was on the Project Alpha team. And he testified about how he had spent almost a year and a half working on the redesign of the hip throughout 2008, 2009. And eventually, I'm sorry, it was 2007, 2008. So Mr. Hunt testified that throughout 2007 and 2008, he worked on this redesign team, Project Alpha. And that at some point, the decision was made to do nothing with his plans to redesign the hip. And you can tell from the testimony, and there was a very good cross-examination on this, that Mr. Hunt was not happy with the decision and was very frustrated that he had spent a year and a half working on this project only to see it, in essence, thrown in the trash. What's also interesting is that DePuy, after this project, during the time this project was ongoing and after, didn't initiate a recall. They didn't do anything. They didn't issue any warnings. And at the same time that this redesign project was occurring, there were negative results or bad results coming out of Europe about the hip. And instead of acknowledging that there could be a potential problem with the design of the hip, DePuy took the position that any problems with the hip were the result of poor surgical technique by the implanting surgeons, in essence blaming the doctors for the problems with the hip. In essence, today I think was a very good day for the plaintiffs on the issue of liability, and we look forward to see what happens next.